Rain had been falling over Blackwood estate since dusk, turning the winding stone roads into ribbons of silver beneath the glow of antique street lamps. The ancient oaks lining the avenues swayed gently in the cold wind, their branches scratching against one another like quiet whispers exchanged in the dark. Hidden beyond elegant iron gates stood dozens of magnificent mansions, each separated by manicured gardens and centuries-old hedges. They belonged to politicians, financiers, aristocrats, and celebrities who paid fortunes for one luxury above all others: absolute privacy. Tonight, however, the estate belonged to silence. Ethan Carter tightened the collar of his dark security coat as he stepped out of the patrol office. At 32, he had left behind a career in the military, hoping that the peaceful routine of night security would finally quiet the restless memories that still visited him after every sunset. Blackwood Estate had seemed like the perfect assignment. Wealthy residents, advanced surveillance systems, and little more than routine patrols through quiet streets. That illusion lasted less than an hour. "You'll get used to the silence," an older guard named Arthur said while handing Ethan the electronic patrol log. His weathered face carried the exhaustion of someone who had spent too many nights awake. "Just remember one thing." Ethan looked up. Arthur hesitated before speaking. "If your route takes you past Villa 17. He stopped. "Keep driving." Ethan smiled politely. "That's it." Arthur did not smile back. "Just keep driving." The conversation ended there. Shortly after 11 o'clock, Ethan began his first patrol. His vehicle moved slowly beneath rows of towering trees as rain tapped gently against the windshield. The estate appeared almost unreal, every mansion glowing warmly behind enormous windows, every garden trimmed with impossible precision, until he reached the end of Blackwood Lane. Villa 17 stood alone beyond a black wrought iron gate. Unlike every other residence, its lights burned in every room. Golden light spilled through the tall windows, illuminating elegant curtains and marble columns. It looked welcoming, almost alive, as though a family had gathered inside for a late evening meal. Yet, according to the security database, no one had lived there for 2 decades. Ethan slowed the patrol car. He opened the digital property file. Property Villa 17. Owners Richard Holloway, Eleanor Holloway. Status: entire household deceased. Case closed 20 years earlier. The official report offered little explanation. One winter night, every member of the Holloway family had been found dead inside the mansion. There were no signs of forced entry. No suspect had ever been identified. After the investigation, ownership became entangled in endless legal disputes, and the estate remained permanently abandoned. Yet every night, the lights came on. Ethan frowned. Maintenance records showed something even stranger. There had been no electrical service connected to the mansion for 19 years. His fingers paused above the tablet. That was impossible. He looked back toward the house. Warm light still glowed behind the windows. For a brief moment, he thought he saw movement on the second floor. A curtain shifted. Someone or something had just stepped away from the glass. Ethan blinked. The window was empty again. The radio at his shoulder crackled with sudden interference before falling silent. Only the rain remained. He stared at Villa 17 for another long moment before continuing his patrol, but as the mansion disappeared behind the trees, he could not shake the unsettling feeling that someone inside had been watching him the entire time, and somewhere behind one of those illuminated windows, someone was still waiting. Ethan continued along Blackwood Lane, but Villa 17 followed him long after it had disappeared behind the rain-soaked trees. Its golden windows remained fixed in his thoughts. By 11:30, the rain had weakened into a pale mist. It drifted between the mansions, softening their marble walls and turning the estate into something half-real, like a forgotten village, preserved inside an old European painting. Ethan completed the western route without incident, checked 3 private gates, and reported a fallen branch near the Chapel Road. Everything appeared ordinary. Yet when his patrol brought him back toward Blackwood Lane, a quiet unease returned to his chest. Villa 17 was still illuminated. The lights had not changed. Every room glowed with the same warm, patient brightness, untouched by the passing hours. Ethan slowed his vehicle, but did not stop. Arthur's warning echoed in his mind. "Just keep driving." As the patrol car passed the gates, Ethan noticed a shadow behind a ground floor curtain. It moved slowly across the room. Not the uncertain movement of fabric disturbed by wind, but the unmistakable silhouette of a person walking from one side of the window to the other. Ethan pressed the brake. The shadow stopped. For one terrible moment, it seemed to turn toward him. Then it vanished. "Control, this is Carter," Ethan said into his radio. Can you confirm whether any maintenance staff are authorized inside number 17 tonight? Only Static answered. Control. A low crackling sound filled the vehicle. Beneath it, Ethan thought he heard breathing soft, irregular, and painfully close. Then Arthur's voice emerged. Carter, leave that road. The transmission broke apart. Arthur, I saw someone inside. No, you didn't. The old guard sounded frightened now. Finish your route. Do not approach the house. The radio went silent before Ethan could reply. He continued driving, though. Every instinct urged him to look back. During the next patrol, the estate seemed to grow unnaturally still. The fountains no longer whispered. The wind had fallen away. Even the rain appeared suspended in the yellow circles beneath the street lamps. At 2 minutes before midnight, Ethan returned to Blackwood Lane for the third time. Villa 17 stood ahead of him, like a beautiful corpse. All its windows were still burning. Then, precisely at midnight, every light inside the mansion went out. The darkness was immediate and complete. Ethan stopped the vehicle. A second later, a violent alarm shattered the silence. Red lights flashed above the mansion's iron gate. The security tablet beside Ethan awakened, displaying a warning in bright letters. Intrusion detected Villa 17. His radio crackled. This time the voice was not Arthur's. It was calm, mechanical, and without emotion. Patrol officer required to enter the property. Ethan stared at the dark mansion. Control request confirmation. No answer came. The gate began opening by itself. Beyond it, the gravel path stretched toward the front door, pale beneath the mist. Ethan reached for his torch, but before he could leave the vehicle, a single upstairs window flickered back to life. A small figure stood behind the glass. It looked like a little girl. She lifted one hand and slowly pointed toward the front entrance. Then the door of Villa 17 opened. The front door remained open. Beyond it, darkness gathered inside Villa 17 like deep water. Ethan sat motionless behind the wheel, staring along the gravel path. The small figure had vanished from the upstairs window, but the pale rectangle of light remained. It illuminated the mist drifting past the glass, giving the impression that the house was breathing. The intrusion alarm continued to pulse across his security tablet. Officer response required. Ethan pressed the radio button again. Arthur, do you read me? Static hissed through the speaker. Control, this is Carter. I am entering Villa 17. No one answered. He switched on his body camera, checked the torch attached to his belt, and stepped out into the cold. The iron gate stood fully open now. Its black bars rose on either side of him like the entrance to an abandoned cathedral. As Ethan passed between them, the alarm stopped. The sudden silence was worse. Rainwater shone across the gravel, but the path leading to the mansion looked strangely untouched. No weeds had broken through it. No fallen leaves had gathered beside the steps. Even the hedges were trimmed with unnatural precision. The estate records claimed the property had been abandoned for 20 years. Nothing here appeared abandoned. Ethan climbed the marble steps. Security, he called through the doorway. Is anyone inside? His voice traveled into the house and disappeared. He crossed the threshold. Warm air touched his face. Ethan stopped immediately. Outside, the November night was bitter enough to numb his fingers. Inside the mansion, a fire burned in the drawing room. Its flames moved gently behind a brass screen, filling the entrance hall with the scent of cedar wood. Crystal lamps glowed upon the walls. Their light revealed polished black and white tiles, velvet curtains, and a grand staircase curving toward the upper floor. Not a single thread of dust rested upon the furniture. Fresh white lilies stood in a porcelain vase beneath an enormous oil portrait of the Holloway family. Richard and Eleanor Holloway sat together in formal evening clothes. Behind them stood their teenage son, his expression solemn. The little girl in a white dress rested one hand upon her father's shoulder. Ethan stared at her face. She looked like the figure from the window. A clock ticked somewhere deeper in the house. The sound was calm and regular. Tick, tick, tick. Ethan forced himself to move. Security inspection, he announced. If anyone is present, identify yourself. Still, no response. He entered the drawing room and approached the fireplace. The logs were newly cut. The brass tools beside the hearth were polished. On a side table stood an open book and a glass containing a small measure of amber-colored liquid. Ethan touched the glass. It was warm. He pulled his hand away. A soft sound came from the corridor. Not a footstep. The gentle scrape of cutlery against porcelain. Ethan followed it into the dining room. A long table waited beneath a crystal chandelier. 4 places had been prepared with silver knives, folded linen, and fine china. Candles burned steadily in tall holders. Wine had been poured into 4 glasses. Dinner had already been served. Roasted meat rested upon a silver platter. Steam rose from it in delicate white threads. Potatoes glistened with butter. A bowl of vegetables stood beside a dish of dark bread. The meal looked as though the family had left the table only seconds earlier. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Arthur," he whispered into the radio. "Someone has been maintaining the house." Static answered. He stepped around the table, studying each chair. 3 had been pulled back slightly. The 4th, the smallest, remained close to the table. A child's plate sat before it. Beside the plate lay a silver spoon engraved with one word, Clara. The name matched the little girl listed in the old report. Ethan heard a dull creak above him. He raised his torch toward the ceiling. Another creak followed, then a third. Someone was walking across the upper floor. "Stop where you are," Ethan called. The footsteps continued toward the staircase. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan drew the collapsible baton from his belt and moved back into the entrance hall. The staircase was empty. He aimed his torch upward. "Blackwood security, show yourself." The footsteps stopped directly above him. A cold drop touched the back of Ethan's neck. He turned sharply. No one was there. Only the Holloway family portrait watched from the wall. Ethan climbed the stairs. Each step gave a low wooden groan beneath his weight. The upper corridor stretched in both directions, lined with closed doors and framed photographs. The patterned carpet softened his footsteps. At the far end, one door slowly swung inward. Ethan approached it. The room beyond belonged to a child. Pale wallpaper covered the walls. A wooden rocking horse stood beside the window. Dolls sat neatly upon shelves, their painted eyes reflecting the beam of Ethan's torch. Over the bed hung a mobile of silver stars turning gently, although the windows were closed. On the pillow rested a small indentation, as though someone had just lifted their head. Ethan checked behind the curtains beneath the bed and inside the wardrobe. Nothing. Then the rocking horse began to move. Once forward, once back. Ethan retreated into the corridor. His radio suddenly came alive. "Carter." Arthur's voice was faint, almost buried beneath interference. "Arthur, where the hell have you been? You went inside. The alarm required inspection." No alarm appeared at the office. Ethan looked down at his tablet. The warning had disappeared. The device now showed no record of an activation. "I saw it," Ethan said. The gate opened. The front door opened. "There's food on the table. The fire is burning, and someone is upstairs." Arthur remained silent for several seconds. Then he whispered, "Leave immediately." The door slammed somewhere behind Ethan. The corridor lights went out one after another. Darkness traveled toward him. The first lamp died near the staircase. Then the second. Then the third. Ethan ran. He reached the stairs as the final lamp extinguished. Only his torch remained, its beam shaking across the walls. Halfway down, he heard rapid footsteps following him. They were small and light, a child running barefoot. Ethan reached the entrance hall and turned. The staircase was empty, but the footsteps continued descending, one step at a time. Closer, closer. He backed toward the open front door. The family portrait caught his torchlight. Something had changed. In the painting, the little girl no longer stood beside her father. Her place was empty. Ethan stumbled outside. The front door slammed behind him, with enough force to shake the marble steps. At once, every light in Villa 17 returned. Golden warmth filled the windows. The alarm remained silent. Ethan hurried down the gravel path, refusing to look toward the upstairs room. When he reached the gate, it began closing behind him. He slipped through just before the iron bars met. For several moments, he stood beside the patrol car, breathing hard. Rain gathered upon his face and uniform. His body camera continued blinking steadily against his chest. Arthur's voice came through the radio. Carter returned to the office. Now, Ethan opened the car door. Before climbing inside, he looked back at the mansion. The front door was closed. The dining room windows revealed a glowing chandelier and the table still prepared for 4. But now someone occupied the smallest chair. The little girl sat with her back to the window. Slowly she turned her head toward Ethan. The lights went out again. This time he did not wait for them to return. Arthur was waiting when Ethan returned to the security office. The old guard stood beneath the fluorescent lights with both hands resting on the desk. Rain darkened Ethan's uniform, and his breathing had not yet settled, but Arthur's face suggested that he had expected something far worse. "You should never have gone inside," he said. Ethan removed the body camera from his chest. "The system ordered me to enter. There was no order. I heard it." Arthur looked toward the dark monitor wall. "That house has been giving orders for 20 years. Ethan placed the camera on the desk. "Then we review the footage." For several minutes, neither man spoke. The recording began with Ethan leaving the patrol car. The iron gate stood open. The front door waited beyond the mist. Everything appeared exactly as Ethan remembered it. The fire, the immaculate hall, the dining table, the child's bedroom. Nothing supernatural appeared on the screen. Arthur watched with his jaw clenched. Then Ethan noticed movement behind himself. Pause. Arthur froze the image. At the edge of the entrance hall stood a little girl in a white dress. Her dark hair hung over her shoulders. Her bare feet rested upon the polished tiles. She was staring directly into the body camera. Ethan felt the blood leave his face. "I never saw her." Arthur advanced the footage. The girl followed Ethan into the drawing room. She stood behind him while he touched the warm glass. She entered the dining room and remained beside the smallest chair as Ethan examined Clara's spoon. When he climbed the staircase, she climbed after him, always one step behind, never making a sound. For more than 40 minutes, she remained close enough to touch his coat. In the child's bedroom, the footage showed her standing beside the rocking horse while Ethan searched beneath the bed. Her lips moved as though she were speaking into his ear. "What is she saying?" Ethan whispered. Arthur increased the volume. Beneath the static came a child's voice. "Find him." The recording ended when Ethan reached the patrol car. But in the final frame, another figure stood at an upstairs window. Not the girl, a man. Ethan leaned closer. The image was blurred, yet something about the man's posture disturbed him. The shoulders were broad, the head tilted slightly to one side. It was a habit Ethan remembered from childhood. His father used to stand that way when he was listening. "My father died when I was 12, Ethan said. Arthur did not answer. Ethan turned toward him. "What do you know?" The old guard closed his eyes. "Your father worked here." The words seemed to drain all sound from the room. "Daniel Carter was night security at Blackwood Estate," Arthur continued. "He was assigned to Villa 17 the night the Holloway family died." Ethan stared at him. "That's impossible. The official record says he disappeared during the investigation. No body was recovered. My mother told me he died overseas." She was told to say that. Arthur opened a locked drawer and removed a thin brown file. Inside were faded reports, photographs, and handwritten statements. One image showed the original Blackwood security team. A younger Arthur stood at the edge. Beside him was Daniel Carter, Ethan's father. He wore the same dark uniform Ethan wore now. Arthur's voice became quieter. After the deaths, people began disappearing near the estate. Gardeners, contractors, 2 police officers. Every few years, someone entered number 17 and never came out. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" "We did. The company buried it. The residents paid for silence. And your father," Arthur swallowed, "your father knew every service tunnel beneath the property." Ethan took the file. At the bottom lay a photograph of the Holloway family in the mansion garden. Behind Richard Holloway stood Daniel Carter, younger and smiling. His hand rested on Clara's shoulder. Ethan returned to Villa 17 before dawn. Arthur tried to stop him, but Ethan no longer listened. He carried the old file beneath his coat and entered through the gate, which opened before he touched it. The mansion was silent. No lights burned now. Only moonlight filtered through the windows. Ethan crossed the hall and climbed directly to the upper floor. The body camera footage had shown the man standing near the eastern window beside a narrow door Ethan had overlooked. Behind it, a servant's staircase descended into darkness. At the bottom lay a hidden corridor. The walls were crowded with photographs, missing guards, workers, police officers. Each face had been carefully dated. At the corridor's end, Ethan found a private room furnished with a bed, a desk, and shelves of preserved food. On the desk rested the Holloway family album. He opened it. The earliest photographs showed celebrations, holidays, and summer afternoons. Daniel Carter appeared again and again. He was not merely a guard. He had been part of the household. In later pages, his expression changed. He stood closer to Eleanor Holloway. Richard was often absent. Clara clung to Daniel's hand. The final photograph had been taken on the night of the tragedy. Daniel stood in the dining room. Behind him, 4 places were prepared. A handwritten line appeared beneath the image, "A family must remain together. You look like your mother." The voice came from behind Ethan. He turned. An old man stood in the doorway. His hair was gray, his face thin and deeply lined, but Ethan recognized him immediately. "Father," Daniel Carter smiled. The expression held no warmth. "They said you were dead. I allowed them to believe it. You killed the Holloways." Daniel looked toward the album. "Richard planned to take Clara away. Eleanor begged me to stop him. Everything happened too quickly. And the others, the people who disappeared, they discovered the truth." Ethan's hand moved toward his radio. Daniel shook his head. "The house protects me. The house is not alive." A child laughed somewhere in the corridor. Daniel's smile faded. "You still believe that Ethan activated the emergency signal." Police arrived within 20 minutes. They surrounded Via 17, entered through every door, and searched every room, corridor, and tunnel. Ethan led them to the hidden chamber. Daniel was gone. There was no second exit, no broken window, no passage beyond the stone walls. Only an old Blackwood security uniform remained upon the bed, carefully folded beneath a polished brass badge bearing Daniel Carter's name. By sunrise, the police had sealed the mansion. Ethan stood beyond the iron gate, while rain washed the darkness from the estate. Arthur waited beside the patrol car, silent and pale. For the first time, every window of Villa 17 was dark. Then a lamp appeared on the upper floor. A small figure stepped behind the glass. Clara raised one hand. Beside her stood a man in a security uniform. Ethan's radio crackled. A mechanical voice emerged through the static. "Patrol officer required at Villa 17. The iron gate slowly opened. And from somewhere inside the mansion, his father whispered, "Your shift has only just begun."